this is casting on and joining in the round. So what we're going to be using for this now is a circular needle instead of a flat needle or a straight needle for a flat project where you would be knitting back and forth. We've still got two needles here, but they're a lot shorter and they're connected by this cord, so that once we get everything casted on and joined up, we're just going to be able to knit continuously in a circle so that we won't need to seam up the toque or whatever project you're working on at the end. So this is a 16-inch needle, which is pretty standard for making a toque. Depending on how many stitches you cast on, it will give you something like a 20 to 22 inch circumference for your toque, which is kind of an average women's head size. So that's what we're going to go with. So I'm going to show you quickly a little bit of casting on. It's the same. We're going to use our long tail cast on. I have one little trick that I'm going to show you for how I make my toques, but otherwise pretty similar. So what we need is about 3 times the length of the needle for our long tail. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out from my ball here. So I just measure right along the needle. It's pretty handy. So 2 and then 3. It doesn't have to be exact. You just want to try to have, again, a little bit more than too little. So there's my 3. I'm going to also just add on just a little bit more just to make sure that I have more than enough. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here with this cast on. So if you need more information, you can look back at my other video where I was doing long tail cast on for a flat project. It's just the same. It's just that we're using this different needle now. So same setup. I'm going to just loop the yarn over the needle instead of making a slip knot. So that's my first trick to make the joining of the stitches seamless. So instead of making an actual slip knot and having to hide that knot later, I'm just going to do this loop. So it looks the same. It's just that it's not connected underneath now, but otherwise the same. So I've got my loop over there, holding the long tail over my thumb at the front, the yarn going to the ball over my index finger at the back, and then we'll go ahead and I'll just do a few here. So again, I'm going to rotate, go under that first over the second, pulling that back one through. So just a quick review just to show you, but again, if you do want more detail, have a look at that other long tail cast on video. So there's a little start that's just getting going on there. So now I'm going to switch to one that's already started here. So now on this one, I've got the stitches that I need to get all the way around. So when you're knitting in the round in a circle, you do need to have enough stitches to get you around your needle. Otherwise it's too tight and it pulls. So you need to have the right amount, and that's going to depend on the size of the needle. This is a really big needle, one of the kind of the biggest you would use to make a regular toque, and also really thick yarn. So if you were using smaller needle, thinner yarn, you would be using a different combination, but your pattern will tell you that. So the other thing that we're using here that's different is a stitch marker. So I'll show you in a second what we're going to do with that, but this is really important because it's going to tell us as we go where the start and end of each round is so that we can follow the pattern. So what I've got on here now, for my pattern, I want 40 stitches. So I have that, but I also have added 1 extra stitch. So that's another part of the technique that I use for making a fairly seamless join. And then before we go ahead and connect them, what we need to check for is that the stitches aren't twisted. So if we have a look here, just looking all the way around, that the stitches are all going the same direction. So if it was twisted, you just sort of see kind of this change in direction there, and you don't want that. So you want to just have everything parallel going the same direction, and then we'll go ahead and do this join. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, here's our loop. So this is what would have been our slip knot, but is just that loop that I showed you earlier. And what we're going to do is we're going to slip that to the right needle purlwise. So we're going to go into it as if we were going to purl. So from right to left with the right needle on top of the left, and then we're just going to slide it off. So I haven't done anything with the yarn, I've just moved that stitch from one needle to the other. And then the second step here is that I'm going to take that extra stitch, that stitch 41, and I'm going to slide it over top of that loop. So now our needles are connected. We've joined in the round mostly, and we're not separate anymore. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that stitch and I'm just going to slide it back. So again, I'm going, well, purlwise, going back that way. So not twisting it, just putting it back to the other side. And I'm going to snug this up so we can use the yarn going to the ball to just tighten that up a little bit. And then we've got our tail there. And then the last step before we actually start knitting is to add in our stitch marker. So again, marking that this is now the start and end of each round. And from there we can just go into our ribbing. So I'm going to do one knit and one purl, just alternating around, so that will give a nice stretchy brim. There's different ways of doing it. Sometimes you would do 2 knits and 2 purls, or 2 knits and 1 purl, lots of different combinations, but again, the pattern will tell you. The only thing about ribbing that's a little bit tricky is that we have to switch the yarn from front to back depending on whether we're knitting or purling. So now I'm going to go to a knit. So I'm going to move the yarn to the back, knit that one, and then to purl now I'm going to bring the yarn back to the front and I'm going to purl. So that's the only little bit of a tricky thing, just making sure you're actually just switching the direction and not actually looping it over the needle, because then you'll get into extra stitches, which gets exciting. Okay, so just a little bit of the ribbing started there. You can see our stitch marker is just following along on the cord there, and once we get back around we'll just slip it and continue on. And I'll just show you here on a finished toque. So this one, this is the back of the toque here where I would have done my join, and you can see that it's really actually hard to see. It's really well hidden. So I've tried several different techniques over time, and doing this one that I've just showed you is the best that I've come up with to really hide that join so that it's not really obvious where that connection was made. So that's casting on and joining in the round.